here we are. Whether you're a college football fan or a Nebraska Cornhusker fan, it is another preseason of talk surrounding a program that has not been to a postseason contest since the year of our Lord 2016. And I use that language because it is certainly something that you would expect to be taught about in history books, as 2016 is closer to a decade gone by than just a year gone by. There are potty-trained children who have not been alive to experience Nebraska going to a bowl game. And that's not even to talk trash on Nebraska. I like Nebraska. And I think that with the amount of history that they have, the amount of respect and resources behind that program, they deserve better than what they have got. And with the hiring of Matt Rhule, I think they got someone who's a proven builder. And I think that this transfer portal class, so far, I expect, especially when it comes to Nebraska, there will be a lot more additions when the second half of the portal cycle is opened up in a few weeks here. Schools like Michigan, I would say Florida State, LSU, a lot of these schools that have a good amount of production returning for 2023 and are already deep, they've gotten a lot of the players they need to get. I don't expect them to be much more active in the portal. But like Colorado, Wisconsin, Nebraska, of course, Minnesota, some of these schools that lost a great amount or had, coaching changes, or they just don't have much depth at all, they're going to continue to be active in the portal. And Ole Miss, with Spencer Sanders, Jackson Dart, Walker Howard, 3 high-level quarterbacks in that room, you're going to see additional departures from some of these programs as well. So expect Nebraska to have some additional departures once spring ball comes around, but also a lot of additions too. And today what I want to talk about is Nebraska's transfer portal class. I'm going to talk a little bit about 2022, a little bit about 2023, like from a football angle, and we're just going to talk Nebraska football today. So where do I begin? I would say where I begin is Nebraska last year was an early adapter when it came to the transfer portal. They had 15 incoming transfer portal commits. 15 of them. They had a top 10 transfer portal recruiting class. Theirs was 7th. They had 15 incoming commits. Some schools around Nebraska in these rankings are UCLA at 8, Alabama at 6, Texas at 5, South Carolina at 9, Arkansas at 10, Oklahoma at 4, LSU at 3, Ole Miss at 2, USC, of course, being 1. They had 20 incoming transfer portal commits, 2 5-stars, 5 4-stars, 12 3-stars. And this was for the 2022 cycle. So all these guys are either, when in the case of USC, they're either still on the USC roster, they're going to the next level, or they're re-entering the portal. I'm just talking about last year to give some context. Even under Scott Frost, who I thought was going to reinvent himself, reinvent the staff, finally get things going, he's a total proven failure and a disaster. And I don't know when he will return to coaching. I anticipate at some point that he will, but he bought a house in Arizona. I think he might have wanted to get the Arizona State job, but he didn't care regardless when he didn't get it. He still bought the house down in Arizona. And even he realized the importance of the portal early on. Nebraska was an early adapter. They used NIL in the cases of Ochaun Mathis and Casey Thompson to get some big-time players to come to the Huskers. And Nebraska, so far, they're not top 10, but they have 11 portal commits. They're top 30, And I expect them to climb in the rankings and leapfrog a lot of teams, as they're a team that, look, let's face it, they need all the help they can get. They need to weed out as much as they can, because Mike Riley had the reins of the program for 3 years. Scott Frost had it for 5. That's 8 years of, at best, mediocre football, often atrocious football. A lot of those players, they need to go, they need to be retrained, or if they're great players, they need to be retained. That's what needs to happen there in Lincoln, Nebraska. So, Nebraska was an early adapter last season. This season, they have 11 commits. We're going to get into some of these commits very soon. They need them wherever they can get. Offensive line, especially. I saw that an offensive lineman coming out of Georgia was crystal balled to Nebraska. I exactly forget his name, but I'll find it here in a few minutes. But offensive line, defense, Nebraska had one of the worst defenses in the country. It's Jacob Hood, offensive tackle out of Georgia, low-ranked 4-star. He is crystal balled to the Huskers currently. 6'8", 342 pounds. He's been crystal balled to Nebraska by Michael Bruntz, who's a Nebraska insider on Husker 24/7. So that would be the third player from Georgia going to Nebraska, along with Arik Gilbert and MJ Sherman. We'll be talking about those two in a little more detail here in a few minutes. Matt Rhule added depth to the roster at quarterback with Jeff Sims coming in. Logan Smothers is still with the team. I think Chubba Purdy is still with the team. I haven't heard any news of any departures there, but there have been some guys that have definitely left. Garrett Nelson has departed the program to the NFL. Ochon Mathis left. Kevin Williams, who I thought was going to be a big breakout, good Big Ten style offensive guard, he's transferred to the Charlotte 49ers. Jaquez Yant, who's expected to have a breakout year 2 by many, he's transferred to Florida A&M. Just looking at some other players, Jaden Gould, who is Nebraska's best prospect of the 2022 class, is transferring to Syracuse at corner. DeColdis Crawford is transferring to Louisiana Tech. Ernst Hausmann transferring to Michigan. That right there is a big time loss for Nebraska. Huge gain for Michigan. Isaiah Garcia Castaneda is returning. That's good news. He entered the portal on October 11th, and he has elected to return to the Huskers. So certainly a lot of roster turnover that's going on. Expect more in spring football. And Corn Crazed, I went live with him 2 times, one in the preseason for 2022, one the week before the Nebraska-Michigan game. And he asked me a question talking about how Nebraska was an early adapter to the portal, but with their failures in 2022, where they went 4-8, and with the fact that a lot of their transfers didn't necessarily pan out, Corn Crazed, who I think is the best Nebraska channel on YouTube, by the way, check him out if you haven't already. I'll link his channel down below. I should probably do that in every Nebraska video because he knows what he's talking about and he's a great channel. Really cool guy as well. And he asked if he thought that Nebraska's success, or more accurately lack thereof, would turn away some guys from going to the Huskers. And I think because of the coach that they hired, the fact that Nebraska has NIL opportunities, and the fact that, listen, the transfer portal exists so that guys can prove themselves. Oftentimes you're getting backups from other schools or players who are at a lower level of football but want to prove themselves at another school. And the appeal to go to Nebraska is different than the appeal to, if you're CJ Dupree and you're transferring from Maryland to Alabama. There's different motivations for that. Because to transfer to Nebraska, you could get all the credit and the attention for being a big playmaker and potentially bringing them back, like what Kenneth Walker did with Michigan State. He went on a team that was a disaster entirely. And because of what he did to help them, that fed his draft stock, that gave him more attention, it really benefited him to go to Michigan State, because in a certain sense, he was advertising himself by helping Michigan State win games. So there's certainly an appeal to go to a school like Nebraska. Obviously going 4-8, having the 102nd best offense in the country, only scoring 22.6 points per game, the 77th best defense, allowing 27.6 points per game. Realistically, the 2021 team was so much better than the 2022 team in every aspect except for mental toughness. And the Iowa game showed that. And that's the sad reality of the Scott Frost era, is in truth that 2021 team, if they just had some mental toughness, that would have been it. They could have won the West that year with the talent they had, and maybe if they had, a replacement for Matt Lubick at offensive coordinator. Don't change anything else, add mental toughness, get a better OC than Matt Lubick, or have someone else but Scott Frost call the plays, and maybe 2021 Nebraska is something. But that's the past. We're looking in the future now. And what Matt Rhule, Marcus Satterfield, and Tony White, what they're doing at Nebraska, I think is good. I think they are setting themselves up for success. And Matt Rhule is a proven builder. As we've talked about, Temple, Baylor, he brought them all good success. So in that, I think that Nebraska, they won big with that hire. The Huskers have 11 transfer portal commits so far. 6 of them are ranked. The other 5 have yet to be ranked by 24/7 Sports transfer portal ranking system. 1 4-star, which is Jeff Sims, quarterback from Georgia Tech, and 5 of them are 3 stars. Offensive line, huge area of concern. Most skill positions, ironically, are fantastic when it comes to depth. Having Jeff Sims and Casey Thompson, that's a lot of talent for a QB room anywhere you go. At wide receiver, you have Marcus Washington, who fared pretty well this past season. You have Isaiah Garcia-Castaneda. You have Alante Brown. And it sounds like Xavier Betts is actually going to return to the program. So you have a lot of talent at wide receiver, even with Trey Palmer departing. You have Anthony Grant at running back, I think, along with Ramir Johnson. And Anthony Grant didn't have quite as good of a season as I thought he would, but that was more on the offensive line and their piss poor play than it was on him. He nearly had 1,000 rushing yards behind arguably the nation's worst offensive line. And then adding Arik Gilbert at tight end, that right there, just from a raw talent perspective, is huge too. And Nebraska got a commit from him early. So you'll probably get to test him out and see what he can do in spring ball, where he looked really good in the Georgia game. But of course, with Darnell Washington and Brock Bowers at Georgia, 2 of the best tight ends in the country, he didn't see much action. But skill positions on offense are pretty good for Nebraska, in my own opinion, with what they already have in the portal, plus what they have on deck. The offensive line, I have no clue what's up. Retaining Donovan Raiola was sort of a confusing move for me, but it is what it is. On defense, it's just, listen, the defensive line situation does not look good whatsoever. Linebacker, secondary, nothing in my opinion just looks very good. Like that right there, honestly, should, in my opinion, be the focus of this transfer portal cycle. Let's check out Nebraska's depth chart so far for the 2023 season. It may not be completely updated yet, but I just want to look at some stuff. Casey Thompson, of course, is the projected starting QB. Anthony Grant is at running back. They have not included Arik Gilbert committing yet and enrolling because that was just a recent addition. But And the offensive line, you have Teddy Prohaska at tackle, along with Bryce Benhart, Turner Corcoran, and Noradin Newley at guard, and Ben Scott at offensive center. At wide receiver, Marcus Washington, Alante Brown, Billy Kemp IV are projected as starters. That right there is the projected depth chart on offense. Nate Borkacher is the projected starting tight end. And then there's Chris Hickman as well. I have to confess, I do not know a whole lot about anyone in Nebraska's tight end room, so I don't know if that projection's accurate. On defense, the projection is MJ Sherman and Chief Borders at edge. Defensive tackle, Ty Robinson and Elijah Judy. At linebacker, Nick Henrich and Luke Reimer, who I thought were going to have a really good season in 2022, but they flopped. Quentin Newsome, Malcolm Herzog, Isaac Gifford, Miles Farmer, and Marcus Buford anchor the secondary. That's a lot of returning starters in production. So the secondary, I think, just from that perspective, you could probably get some additions, or at least, coach them up, maybe weed some of them out and see if they are truly Big Ten secondary players or not. But that, in my opinion, is the best look on defense, would be the corners and safeties. Rhule needs to fix the holes left on the roster from 2022's horrible campaign, and getting MJ Sherman, getting Corey Collier, getting, in my opinion, Jeff Sims, Arik Gilbert, I'd say, just from looking at the tight end room and how I don't know anything about most of them, and the fact that Travis Vokalek is departing and his eligibility has been exhausted, that's big. It's important to fill in holes, and even if you're not bringing in players who are going to start, look at Colorado. They're probably going to bring in nearly 30 incoming transfers. Some of those guys are just bodies in case injuries, inevitably, because injuries are a part of the sport when they inevitably happen. So Rhule right now is doing a really good job. Really good job. The signs for success overall, I'm talking about long-term, short-term success, with just year one, Luke Fickell, Iowa returning a lot. Luke Fickell's referencing Wisconsin, obviously. Illinois on the rise. There is a lot of competition, a lot of it, in the Big Ten West. But success overall, Nebraska contending for the Big Ten West, or contending for being in the higher tier of the Big Ten in the future, they're on track to doing it. I mean, I see all the good signs that I saw entering the 2022 season. I'm seeing them entering the 2023 season. The difference is you have a more proven builder in Matt Rhule. You don't have Scott Frost, who had 4 losing seasons and inevitably was going to have his 5th losing season. You have a little bit more safety and a little bit more confidence and less heat when it comes to picking confidence and giving confidence to Matt Rhule and his staff at the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Importantly, I want to mention that Nebraska has 6 incoming transfers from the SEC. None of them, of course, were main contributors, main players, or starters, but it's still important because we all know that the SEC, most players on SEC rosters, unless you're looking at, Vanderbilt, Missouri, South Carolina, and even they're going upward in the recruiting world. A lot of those teams, their backups have extremely high ceilings and raw talent, and a lot of them were highly recruited out of high school. This is especially the case with 2 of them. Of course, from Georgia, who's just coming off from winning, 2 back-to-back national titles. They are linebacker, edge player MJ Sherman, and tight end wide receiver hybrid Arik Gilbert. MJ Sherman, 6'2", 250 pounds, junior out of Baltimore, Maryland. This season, he had 5 total tackles, 4 of them solo, and he had a half sack. That half sack coming against Georgia Tech. He had a tackle in the TCU, Georgia Tech, Kent State, and South Carolina games. Backup player, but to be a backup on Georgia's defense probably means you could be a starter on Nebraska's defense because those defenses played polar, opposite extreme ends of the spectrum in 2022. So very good addition from defensive coordinator Tony White and head coach Matt Rhule. When it comes to Marcus Satterfield and what he wants in Matt Rhule, Arik Gilbert, a player that has had trouble in his career, but 6'5", 255 pounds, out of Marietta, Georgia, sophomore, ridiculously high ceiling, one of the highest rated recruits in his respective class. In his career, he has had 37 receptions for nearly 400 receiving yards and 3 receiving touchdowns. This season with Georgia, he had 2 receptions for 16 yards and a touchdown in one game against Vanderbilt. He looked amazing in Georgia's spring game. In the 2020 season with LSU, he had 35 receptions for 368 yards, averaged 10.5 yards per carry, and he had 2 receiving touchdowns. Those guys, I expect, as long as they survive spring and summer, they will be big contributors if they stay with the program. That is certainly what I expect. You know, Arik Gilbert was certainly living in the shadows of Darnell Washington, who's going off to the NFL, and Brock Bowers, who's returning for another season. So Arik Gilbert at best would be tight end number 2 next season for Georgia, and Oscar Delp, who was a very good tight end recruit in the 2021 recruiting class. I don't think 2022, I'm pretty sure 2021, but correct me if I'm wrong. He's a rising star for Georgia's tight end room. So Gilbert, by coming to Nebraska, it'll be his 3rd school, but this will be outside of him at LSU where he was dismissed. This will be his best chance to show his raw talent and what he is capable of. So 11 incoming additions thus far. One of them is a returning addition in Isaiah Garcia Castaneda. Look, offensive line, defensive line, that could use some more additions, but it looks like right now that Nebraska, they're filling in holes. They're trying to repair the drywall. Eventually, they might have to completely knock it down, but that process will be slow, it'll be methodical, and through recruiting, and even through the portal, and through workouts, through training, through strength and conditioning, they will build a better foundation for Nebraska's future. So far, given Matt Rhule's resume, given the coordinator hires, and given the portal, I grade Matt Rhule's preseason preparation for his first season at Nebraska in the A range, and there should be hope. He might even, in my opinion, there's a very good chance they could reach a bowl game in year 1, given the wide open state of the Big Ten West. That's all I have to say for this video. If you liked it, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, click the notification bell, and comment your thoughts on this video down below. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you around. Bye-bye.